In this session, we will be discussing about the analysis of running. And all of us will be knowing the running is an important component of any sports activity. So, whether it is football, whether it is cricket, whether it is basketball or volleyball, running is an important component of all the activities. 90% of the sports activities contain a part, running part. And running, it's a recreational activity also, and running in the stage of during rehabilitation and during the motor development, running can be given as an important activity. And another important thing regarding running is that it always, most of this running, especially in the competitive sports, running causes injury. Now, we discussed in last classes regarding walking and the gait cycle. So, there are some difference in the running and walking. We will just go through what are the differences in running and walking cycles. Usually, once we consider regarding the velocity, and velocity in running, there is difference in the velocity. Velocity in case of running will be more. Next difference in running and walking is that there will be difference in the kinematic and kinetic parameters. That is kinematic parameters like the joint movements, the flexion, extension, the movements of the hip, the movements of the knee. In all these kinematic parameters, there is an increase in the kinematic parameters can be seen in running. And there is a difference in the as the kinematic parameters increases. There is a increase in the kinetic parameters also. That is more muscular movement and more muscles will be involved in case of running. And when compared to the energy cost of running will be more when compared to walking. And there are differences in the phases also. Now, there are differences in the phase, and in case of walking, there we can see always a phase of double support phase. That is, there are some stages where both limbs comes into contact with the ground. But in case of running, there is no double limb support phase. Instead of double limb support phase, there is a phase called flight phase. Always there is a phase called flight phase. In this phase, both feet are in the air. So there is a phase called flight phase can be seen in case of running. At the same time, there is no flight phase in walking. There is a phase called double support phase is seen in case of walking. Now, we will go through the running cycle. Running cycle can be broadly classified into two phases. A support phase or a support phase, otherwise contact phase, and a recovery phase. Support phase is the phase where the body is in touch with the ground or the feet is in touch with the ground. And recovery phase is the phase where the reference phase is in the air or which is not in touch with the ground. So, running cycle can be divided into two phases, a support phase and a recovery phase. Support phase is the phase where the body is in touch with the ground, and the recovery phase is the phase where the body is not in contact with the ground and the body will be in the air. So, running cycle can be classified into, it can be grouped into two phases. The first phase is the support phase and the second phase is the recovery phase. Support phase is also called contact phase, and is the phase where the foot is in the reference extremity is in contact with the ground. And the recovery phase is the phase where the reference extremity is in the air, that is not in contact with the ground. Now, contact phase can be divided into three parts or three phases. It is foot strike, mid support and takeoff. And recovery phase can be again divided into three, that is follow through, forward swing and foot descent. So, we will go through each phases again. First one is contact phase. Contact phase can be subdivided into foot strike, mid support and takeoff. Foot strike is the point where foot is in initially contact with the ground until the plantar surface of the foot is in fully plantigrade with the support. That is, the foot, once the foot initially contact the ground, until the entire surface, entire plantar surface of the foot is in completely support with the ground or plantigrade with the ground. This phase is called foot strike. Now, there are different foot strike patterns can be seen. But in case of walking, we have seen only the heel strike. But in case of running, there are different types of foot strike pattern can be seen. Either it may be a rear foot, either it may be a mid foot, or either it may be a forefoot. So, there are three types of foot strike pattern can be seen in running. The first one is rear foot strike or rear foot strikers. Second one is mid foot strike, and the third one is forefoot strike. Now, types of foot strike, we already discussed that there are three types of foot strike: heel strike or rear foot strike, mid foot strike or whole foot strike, and forefoot strike. So, the first one is heel strike or rear foot strike. So, usually this type of the heel strike is better in case of long distance runners or marathon runners, because presence of a heel pad, and there is a presence of a heel pad, this heel pad acts as a shock absorber, and it is having a better ability to absorb high impact forces. So, heel strike or rear foot strike is better in case of long distance runners or marathon runners. But at the same time, forefoot strike, it is especially used by sprinters, used in sprinting. But another negative thing in this, demerit of this forefoot strike is that there is chance of metatarsalgia, because more pressure will be on the metatarsal heads, and it causes metatarsalgia of the foot. Now, rear foot strikers usually demonstrate a double peak vertical component of ground reaction force. A ground reaction, once he strike the foot on the ground, there will be an opposite ground reaction force will be there, and in the studies it is shown that there is double peak force component of the ground reaction force can be seen in case of rear foot strike, because once the foot strike there is an increased peak vertical force component, and in the once is mid foot strike in the second stage, so again there will be a peak component of vertical force. Now, in case of mid foot strikers, there is only a single peak vertical force component can be seen in researches. Now, once the foot is striken on the ground, there will be the absorption of the initial impact of the foot is done by rapid extension of the hip. The hip will be rapidly extended at just after the foot strike, and there will be a flexion of the knee, rapid flexion of the knee. So, these work as an absorptive mechanism and decreases the initial impact of the foot strike. So, the first phase is the foot strike or the foot strike, and it may be a heel strike or rear foot strike, mid foot strike or hind foot strike. Now, mid support. So, first is we discussed about the foot strike, and there are three types of foot strikes has seen, and these are forefoot strike, mid foot strike and hind foot strike. Now, the second phase is the mid support phase. Mid support phase is the phase where the foot is in contact with the ground until the heel starts to leave the ground. This is mid support is the foot will be in plantigrade. In the foot strike phase, the foot will be in plantigrade with the ground, and then from that position until the heel starts to leave the ground, this phase is called mid support phase. And next phase is the takeoff phase. Takeoff phase means once the heel starts to leave the ground until the toes are completely free from the supporting surface, this phase is known as takeoff phase or takeoff point. Now, the purpose of the support phase is, the first one is the re-establish contact with the supporting surface. provide a stable base of support for advancing the opposite limb in the recovery phase, and it reverses the retarding influence of early stance phase. Now the recovery phase. The second phase is the recovery phase. The recovery phase can be divided into 3 stages. The first one is follow through, then forward swing, then foot descent. Follow through means once the foot leaves the ground, once the reference extremity leaves the ground, it starts its backward motion or posterior motion. So follow through phase means once the trailing foot leaves the ground until the foot stops its posterior motion, and this stage is known as follow through stage. Next, just after the follow through stage, forward swing stage starts. Forward swing means initiation of the forward movement, that is once the posterior motion is over, the foot starts its anterior motion. That is initiation of this anterior motion or forward motion until the foot reaches its maximum forward position. This stage is called forward swing. So again, once the initiation of forward movement until the foot reaches its maximum forward position, this stage is known as forward swing. Next stage in the recovery phase is the foot descent phase. Foot descent means once the foot might have reached its maximum forward position, from that position until the next foot strike. So this stage is known as foot descent. Now we will go through some characteristic of running. The first one is stride length. Regarding the stride length and frequency tends to increase with increase in running speed. Then stride length, it depends upon the leg length, range of motion of the hip, and strength of the leg extensors. As the range of motion of the hip increases, again the stride length increases. As the leg length increases, again the stride length increases. As the leg extensors are more strong, there will be more stride length. Then there will be, for an individual, there will be an optimum stride length. So if we are increasing the stride length or decreasing the stride length, there will be the more energy cost. Forcing to increase or decrease the stride length increases the energy cost. Now in case of uphill running, the stride length decreases, and in case of downhill running, the stride length increases. Now the stride frequency depends upon the speed of muscle contraction and the skill of running. Now once the person runs, both feet tends to fall in a same line of progression. Now with increase in, next point is, with increase in running speed and duration of the support, with increase in running speed, duration of the support phase keep on decreasing and recovery phase increases. So as the running speed increases, the support phase decreases and recovery phase increases. Now once the foot strike on the ground, the foot will be in front of the center of mass of the body. But the distance from the foot contact to the center of gravity is shorter in running when compared to walking. This distance becomes shorter with increase in speed. I will explain it again. As the foot strikes on the ground, usually the foot will be in front of the center of gravity or center of mass of the body. And this distance between the foot strike point and the point of the center of mass or center of gravity, it will be less in running when compared to walking. This distance, the distance between the center of mass and the foot strike point, will keep on decreasing, or it decreases, it becomes small as the running speed increases. Now we will be discussing, we will be just going through what are the difference between the running and walking phase. In case of running, the swing phase will be longer. But in the case of walking, the stance phase will be longer. So running, swing phase will be longer, and walking, stance phase will be longer. Again, the second point is that we discussed in the previous slides regarding the period of a double support. The period of double support will be absent in case of running, but in case of walking there is a period of double support. At the same time, there is a phase called a floating phase where both legs are in air. It can be seen in case of running, but there is no period of floating period in case of walking. Now, stride length will be longer in case of running and it will be shorter in case of walking. Stride frequency, number of strides per second, stride frequency will be higher in case of running and it will be lower in case of walking. The position of the body's center of mass will be in a lower level in case of running, but in case of walking, the center of mass position of the center of mass will be in a higher position. Now, the vertical oscillation of the center of mass will be less in case of running, it will be more in case of walking. Next is linear and angular velocity of the lower extremity will be faster in case of running and it will be in case slower in case of walking. And we will be knowing, we already discussed, there will be required range of motion and muscle activity will be more and greater in case of running, but the range of motion required and the muscle activities will be lesser in case of walking. Then foot progression line will be in case of running, the foot progression line will be a single line along the midline of the body. But in case of walking, there will be two parallel lines. There will be two parallel lines the line of progression will be two parallel lines. Now, the ground reaction force will be, in case of running, it is 2.5 to 3 times of the body weight. At the same time, in case of walking, it is 90% of the body weight. So, ground reaction will be 2.5 to 3 times more than the walking. Now, we will go through different joint movements in the running stage. In case of from foot strike to mid support, at the point of foot strike, the hip will be at 45 degree of flexion. Now, from at that point, the hip goes into an extension, abrupt extension, and it reaches into a 20 degree of flexion. Knee will be at 20 degree, there will be at the foot strike to mid support phase, knee goes into a fast flexion, that is knee was in 20 degree of flexion, it goes into a 40 degree of flexion. Angle will be from 5 degree dorsiflexion, it goes into 10 degree of plantar flexion. From mid support to take off, from 20 degree of hip flexion, it goes into 5 degree of hip extension, 40 degree of knee flexion to 15 degree knee flexion, and angle from 10 degree of plantar flexion, it goes into a 20 degree of dorsiflexion. In the follow through phase, follow through phase means that is from it is the phase where hip goes into its maximum extension. That is from 5 degree of hip extension, it goes into 20 degree hyper extension. At the same time, from the 15 degree knee flexion, knee goes into 5 degree of flexion. Angle from 20 degree dorsiflexion, it goes into a 30 degree plantar flexion. 30 degree plantar flexion. Then next stage is the forward swing stage, where the hip goes into a flexion from 20 degree hyper extension, hip goes into a 65 degree of flexion. From knee 5 degree of flexion, knee also goes into its maximum flexion, that is 5 to 130 degree of flexion. Angle from 30 degree of plantar flexion, it goes into a neutral position. Next stage is the foot descent stage. In foot descent stage, hip from 65 it goes into 40 degree of flexion, knee from 130 degree of flexion to 20 degree of flexion. Angle from 0 to 5 degree of dorsiflexion, it goes into 5 degree of plantar flexion. Now, we will go through the different muscle activity. In the hip joint, rectus femoris is active in early support phase and diminishes in the late support phase. So, rectus femoris is the one muscle is active in early support phase, but it decreases its activity in the late support phase. And hip extensors, mainly gluteus maximus, will be its maximum activity at the foot descent phase, and there is concentric contraction of the iliopsoas, and rectus femoris is seen in the forward swing phase. In the knee joint, quadriceps muscles, peak activity is seen in the early support phase, and in the ankle, concentric contraction of the tibialis anterior and toe extensors are seen in the swing phase. Now, the difference in running and sprinting is that once the running distance is less than 400 meters, it can be considered as sprinting. And in sprinting, the stance phase will be very less, and stance phase is only 22% of the running cycle. Then efficacy of running. The efficacy of running depends upon these factors. The first one is, once there is a decrease in the vertical displacement of the center of mass, it improves the efficacy of running. Second thing is that once the foot strike is close to the line of gravity, it improves the efficacy. And once there is decrease in the lateral movement, it also improves the efficacy of running. Once there is shortening of the swing leg, it also increases the efficacy. And an increase of the stride length also improves the efficacy. Now, we already discussed in the first slide itself that running causes lots of injuries. There are lots of injuries, especially muscular injury, and even the fractures can be seen, stress fractures, muscular injury. There are lots of injuries oftenly seen in runners. So, there are lots of risk factors are there for the injuries. We will go through which are the different risk factors. The first one is an incorrect training and preparation. The second one is, so this will predispose to injury. There is any incorrect training, there is no proper training, and there is no preparation for playing or running, it may cause an injury. The second one is any past injury of running, and if it is not rehabilitated properly, it may cause injuries. The third cause is the biomechanical abnormalities. Any biomechanical abnormalities causes more stress on different parts of the body, and it causes injuries. And inappropriate training surfaces, and next one is an inadequate warm-up. A proper warm-up is necessary to avoid the injury, and an inadequate warm-up causes injuries. Next one is a decrease in the flexibility of the muscle, and inflexibility predisposed to injury. And incorrect running shoes. If the running shoes is not properly fit and the runner is not using, the person is not using the proper running shoes, it causes injury. Or if it is an old running shoe, again may cause injuries. Any muscular imbalance or weakness and inadequate nutrition is also a cause of injury or a predisposing factors to running injuries. Which are the common injuries in running? The common injuries seen are, the first common injury is the runner's knee. Runner's knee is also called chondromalacia patella. It means that just posterior side of the patella, on the posterior side or back side of the patella, there are some cartilages, articular cartilages are there. These articular cartilages get there will be fissures, and this articular cartilage may get damaged, and this causes injury, and there will be this causes pain and inflammation on the posterior side of the patella, and this also known as a cause of anterior knee pain in case of runners, and this condition is called runner's knee. And second common injury seen in runners are the plantar fasciitis. Plantar fasciitis means it is the pain and inflammation of the plantar fascia, and it is commonly seen those who are running on hard surfaces and those who are not using a proper fit shoes, or those who are, especially those who are using hard shoes. Another type of injury commonly seen in runners is the Achilles tendinitis. So it is inflammation and micro trauma to the Achilles tendon, and is commonly seen in peoples who is using an improper shoes. And another type of injury commonly seen in runners is the IT band friction syndrome. IT band is a band seen on the lateral surface of the leg, lateral surface of the knee, and while during running and walking, this IT band goes anteriorly and posteriorly, and it causes friction. There will be chance of friction in the lateral side of the knee joint, and it causes inflammation of the IT band. This condition is called IT band friction syndrome. Next commonly seen injury is the shin splint. Shin splint is nothing but there will be pain on the shin bone, and it is commonly seen those who are, it is another overuse injury, and it is commonly seen in runners, and there are chance of stress fractures, especially on the bones of the feet and lower extremity, commonly seen in runners. Now the causes of injury, we can divide the cause of injury into two. There is an extrinsic cause and intrinsic cause. That is, intrinsic cause, the cause inside the body, and extrinsic cause, the cause from outside the body. So the intrinsic cause may be any biomechanical abnormalities, maybe a lack of flexibility, maybe a malalignment. It may be a leg length discrepancy, that is, a changes in the leg length, differences in the leg length. Maybe a muscular imbalance or a kinetic chain dysfunction. So these are the intrinsic factors, which is from the inside the body. Maybe a biomechanical abnormality, or an inflexibility, or a changes in the leg length, or a muscular imbalance, or a kinetic chain dysfunction causes these injuries. Then there are extrinsic factors also which causes injuries. These are the factors other than from the body. It may be a improper running shoe, an improper training, improper warm-up and cool-down activities, and nutrition. Improper nutrition may be an extrinsic factors. So we'll go through these factors which causes injuries. The first factor may be an inconsistent training or a training error. So sometimes the players may miss out some workout. So there is maybe a missing of several workout in a row, and because of the mental tension, what the player does is that because of the mental tension, he added some additional mileage to catch up the missing workout. So this is one cause of injury. That is, it is a training error. So the one cause is a missing several workouts in a row and then adding additional mileage to catch up the missed workout. Second one is that, second type of training error commonly seen in runners is that, and ignoring the sports. For example, for a training in a running event, he should train as running. So there are some runners who go for swimming or who go for any other training and then consider it as a training for running. For example, a person who is doing only swimming workouts to train a running event. So it is ignoring the sport, and it is another training error commonly seen in runners, and it causes injury. Good morning, everybody. Today in this session, we will be discussing about the biomechanical analysis of the jumping motion. Once we go through the history of the jumping or history of the track and field. Track and field is a sport that dates back over 2,500 years, all the way back to the ancient days. And first organized track and field events, it's known as Olympics in BC 776. But in AD 393, some Roman emperors abolished these organized track and field events, that is Olympics. Again in later 1700s, pedestrianism became again a favorite English sport. And in 1837, first modern track and field event organized in England. And in 1896, everybody know the first modern Olympics started, and it was the track and field was the most important part of that Olympics. And in 1928, the women track and field events added in the Olympics. So once we go through the jumping analysis motion, there are usually two types of jumping motions are used commonly in sports. The first one is long jump and the second one is high jump. So we'll go through the long jump. First of all, the rules of the long jump. There are mainly three basic rules in the long jump. The first one is, if you plant the foot or if you cross the line of the jumping line, so you won't receive any score. That is called foul. If you plant your foot opposite side of the white line before jumping, you will receive no score. That is called foul. And the second one is, your jump will be measured from the furthest back point. As for example, if you are jumping 15 feet and your hand goes 2 feet back, so your jumping will be measured, that is 15 minus 2, that will be 13 foot marks. And everybody knows that the person jumps furthest will win the competition. Now the distance in which the athlete credited in long jump is a sum of 3 lesser distances. It includes the total distance covered will be addition of the 3 different distances, 3 lesser distances. These are the takeoff distance, flight distance, and landing distance. Takeoff distance is the distance between the takeoff foot or the front edge of the takeoff board to the point where the horizontal point, the point where with the center of gravity. I'll explain it again. The takeoff distance is the horizontal distance between the front edge of the takeoff board and athlete's center of gravity at the instant of takeoff. Second distance is the flight distance. Flight distance is the distance where the person's center of gravity travels in the air, or athlete's center of gravity travels in the air. And the third distance is the landing distance. Again, it is the horizontal distance between the center of gravity at the instant heel hits at the sand and the marks in the sand from which the jump is ultimately measured. I explain it again. The landing distance is the horizontal distance between the center of gravity at the instant of heel hits the sand and the marks in the sand from which the jump is ultimately measured. You can see in the picture the takeoff distance, the flight distance, the takeoff distance, the distance between the athletes, the takeoff board, and the center of gravity. And the picture you can see the distance between the flight distance, that is the distance traversed by the center of gravity in the air, and the landing distance, the distance at the landing point, the distance between the center of gravity and the landing foot. Now the takeoff distance depends upon mainly 3 things. The first one is the accuracy in which the athlete places his foot for takeoff. The second one is the physique of the athlete. how much will be its length of its leg, his physique of the athlete is the second factor which determine the takeoff distance. And the third point is the body position at the instant of takeoff. So these are the three factors which determine the takeoff distance. So again, the takeoff distance depends upon three factors. The first one is the accuracy in which the athlete places the foot for takeoff. Second one is the physique of the athlete. It includes height. The main portion is the height of the athlete. And the third point is the body position of the athlete during takeoff. Now the second distance we discussed was the flight distance. Flight distance again depends upon four factors. The first is the speed of the athlete. How much speed he is jumping, in how much speed he is jumping. Second one is in which angle he is jumping. So angle. Third one is in which height the takeoff occurs. And the fourth one is how much the resistance of the air is there. So flight distance depends upon the speed of the jumping, the angle of the jumping, the height of takeoff, and the air resistance to the jump. Now, the speed at the instant of takeoff depends upon two things. The first one is before takeoff, there is a phase called the run-up phase where the subject runs for the takeoff. So the speed at the instant of takeoff depends upon the speed developed in the running, plus there will be some adjustment. There will be some adjustment at the instant of takeoff. For takeoff, there will be some adjustment. There is preparation phase of takeoff. So once the athlete prepare for the takeoff, there is some losses in the speed. The speed get decreased. So there is some losses in the speed associated with the adjustment made in the preparation of takeoff. So speed at the instant of takeoff depends upon two factors. The first is the speed developed by the athlete during the run-up stage. And the second one is the losses of the speed with adjustment made by the person for the preparation of takeoff. So for an ideal speed of a proper jumping, an ideal combination is maximum controlled speed. The speed should be controlled speed. So an ideal combination is his maximum controlled speed in the run-up and minimum losses of speed during the takeoff. So the takeoff speed, the speed at the instant of takeoff depends upon two factors. The speed developed in the run-up phase of the takeoff and the losses in the speed for the preparation of the takeoff. So an ideal combination is the maximum controlled speed during the takeoff in the run-up phase and minimum loss of speed for the preparation of takeoff. Now the landing distance. The landing distance we already discussed. What is landing distance? It is the distance at the point between the center of gravity and the landing foot at the point of landing. So landing distance depends upon again two factors. The first one is body position at the landing or at the touchdown. And which action? What is the action on landing? Now, the factors which influence the body position at touchdown or landing is what is the initial position? What are the changes, movements occur during the run-up phase and takeoff phase? That is rotation imparted to the body during run-up and takeoff. And which are the movements occur in the air to minimize the effect of rotation and the position of the body for landing? How the person is positioned his body for landing. So these are the factors which influence the position of the body during the touchdown phase. Now, once the athlete lands, two types of landing can occur. Either the athlete sits back on the sand or the athlete rotates forward over the foot. So either the person sit back on the sand or rotate over the foot. So this depends upon the magnitude and direction of the ground reaction force exerted on athlete during landing. So either the once during landing, either the person may sit back or rotate forward. So it depends upon in which direction the ground reaction force is exerted and how much magnitude is the ground reaction force. Now consider a condition. If the feet land beneath or slightly forward to the center of gravity. So what will happen is that the ground reaction force passes behind the center of gravity. So once the ground reaction force passes behind the center of gravity, it produces a forward angular momentum and it increases the forward angular momentum. It causes the athlete to rotate quickly forward over the feet. Again I'll explain. If the feet land beneath or slightly forward to the center of gravity, the ground reaction force passes behind the center of gravity. So as the ground reaction forces passes behind the center of gravity, it gives a forward angular momentum, that it increases the forward angular momentum and the person rotates quickly forward over the feet. Now consider another condition. If the athlete lands with the legs fully extended, in that time or in a near horizontal position. So if the athlete lands with fully leg extended or in a near horizontal position, ground reaction will be in front of the center of gravity. So as the GRF or ground reaction force is in front of the center of gravity, it decreases the forward angular momentum. It gives resistance to the forward angular momentum, then it causes the athlete to sit back. So whether the athlete sit back or go forward, so it depends upon where the ground reaction force is force. So if it is in front, if the ground reaction force is in front, so the athlete sits back, and if ground reaction force is on the back, the athletes move forward or rotate forward over the feet. Now we'll go through different techniques used in jumping. There are 4 consecutive parts in jumping motion. This includes, the first one is run up, then take off, then flight, then landing. So the jumping pattern, the long jump pattern can be divided into 4 stages. The first one is a run up stage, second one is a take off stage, then a flight stage and a landing stage. Now the first stage is the run up stage. The purpose of this run up stage is to get an optimal position for takeoff with a controlled speed, and minimum loss of speed. So the purpose of run up speed is to get the athlete into an optimum position for takeoff with a maximum controlled speed. But it varies from individual to individual. The length of run up always varies. Length and speed of run up always varies from individual to individual. There is an optimum speed and optimal length for each individual. Usually, researchers are saying that men, they used to take a run up of 40 to 46 meters. That comes around 19 to 22 strides. And in case of women, it is 37 to 43 meters. It comes around 18 to 22 strides in case of women. Now, in the last stage of run up, I told you the main aim of the run up, the run up should be fast and he should prepare for takeoff. So it should be in a maximum controlled speed with a minimum loss of speed during the preparation of the takeoff. So in the last stage, last strides of the run up, the person has to prepare for his takeoff. So the last strides shows noticeable deviation in the strides, stride length and athlete's center of gravity lowers. So 2 changes are occurring in the person during the preparation of the takeoff. There are changes in the stride length, and second one is changes in the center of gravity. Now what are the changes? The first one is the lengthening of the penultimate stride will be there. There will be lengthening of the penultimate stride and the last stride will be short. So the first preparation of the takeoff is lengthening of the penultimate stride and a last stride will be short. And next one is a lowering of the center of gravity. So lowering of the center of gravity is will be in the starting from the penultimate stride. It is to change the acceleration path to a more vertical position from a horizontal position. So this impulses, the horizontal force can be used, and once the center of gravity decreases, we can change the horizontal path into a vertical path. So for the preparation of the takeoff, two changes are there. One is the lowering of the center of gravity, and the second one is changes in the stride. So changes is lengthening of the penultimate stride and a shorter last stride, and center of gravity lowers to change the horizontal path into a vertical path. Now at the instant of takeoff, the hip will be slightly forward the shoulders and foot advances the hip. Now the takeoff. Takeoff time means it is the period of time between the instant when the takeoff foot touches the ground and the instant when it loses contact with the ground. So main purpose of takeoff to obtain a maximum horizontal velocity. The purpose of takeoff is to obtain a maximum vertical velocity, retaining as much as the horizontal velocity as possible. And at the last stride, we already discussed the center of gravity lowers, the hip and knee goes into flexion, and that's why the center of gravity lowers. And this lowering causes this helps in a fast contraction of the muscles, the fast eccentric contraction of the muscle, and it causes a flight. The person can convert, and reaction to this extension, the athlete drives in the air. So as the center of gravity moving forward, arm and free leg are driven vigorously upward in concern with the forceful extension of the hip and knee and angle joint of the takeoff leg, and reaction to this extension drives the athlete into the air. So the main aim of the lowering of the center of gravity is conversion of the horizontal velocity to a vertical velocity, and once the center of gravity lowers with the flexion of the hip and knee, then a forceful extension of the hip and knee angle joint will be done, and reaction to this extension, it drives the athlete into the air, and the flight phase starts. Now the flight phase. Flight phase, the factors influencing the flight, distance of flight, everything we already discussed. And main objective of the flight phase is now to obtain a maximum distance, and along with that, there should be it arrange the body in such a way that there should be an optimal position for landing. So three types of techniques are usually used in the flight phase in case of long jump. The techniques are, the first one is sail or stride, second one is hang, and the third one is hitch kick. So three types of techniques are used in the flight phase of the long jump. These are sail or stride, second one is hang, and the third one is hitch kick. Now the first we'll discuss about the hang technique. In the hang technique, the athletes bring both legs together shortly after the takeoff and continues the remainder of the flight either in sitting position or the leg fully extended or knee bent at the right angles. So just after the takeoff, the athletes keep the leg together and continue its motion. That is the hang type. And second one is stride style. In the stride jump style, the position of the athlete is like a stride, and in the last the legs are not together, and just before the landing, the athletes keep the leg together. So this style is called stride style. In stride style, the legs are apart, it is like a stride, and in the last stage, that is just before the landing, the athletes keep the legs together and go for landing. And the third type of technique, third flight technique, is the hitch kick. In hitch kick, one leg goes forward, that is, just after the following, the one leg, the free leg, goes backward, it's swung backward, and at the same time the takeoff leg move forward, and the free legs complete its rotation and comes together and ready for landing. So this style is the hitch kick style. So there are three types of flight styles, three types of techniques are used in flight phase, that is sail or stride technique. Second one is hang technique, and the third one is hitch kick. Hang technique is the technique where just after the takeoff, the legs comes together and go for landing, and a sail technique is the technique where the person will be in stride, and just before the landing, the legs comes together, and hitch kick is the style where the landing foot, the takeoff foot move forward, and the free leg goes in a rotation and again be ready for landing. Now, the next stage is the landing stage. There are two things we have to consider once we study the landing stage. The first one is there are factors which influences the distance between the takeoff port and the athlete's center of gravity. And the next is there are some factors which influence whether the athlete passes forward over the feet or falls back. Now, we already discussed how the effect of ground reaction force and how the athlete goes forward or athlete sits back. Now, if the athlete is deliberately leaning forward during the final movement of the flight, now what will happen is that legs, so because of that, in reaction to that, legs are lifted on reaction to this movement and touchdown can be delayed. But this forward inclination of the trunk reduces the landing distance by moving the center of gravity nearer to the feet. So than it would be, and if the trunk is in upright position. So if the athlete is leaning forward, it gives more time for landing, but the landing distance again decreases. So it's having merits and demerits also. Now if the trunk is erect position or the athlete inclined backward, the time of the flight decreases, but the landing distance increases. Here also there are merits and demerits.